So let's just go over Simple Mixer version 0.3. There's some new features. One is this new post effects tab, and that means that now we can add post effects in here. So the Tox Bank has support for movies. So if I just drag this movie up of me, let's 3D scan, and that sort of goes up and just sort of rotates around. And then I can also just drag a tox in and then blend between them, like so. So movies are now in. Movies have a set number. If I go to my bottom left here, they have a set number of parameters there. So we have queuing and all the typical things you'd get from the movie file in top. There's then this post effects tab, which has some different post effects on. So to add a post effect, I could, for example, if I want to add a post effect to this sphere, then I can go into post effects, and here at the bottom I have these 10 banks, and each bank is basically a post effect in order of how they are assigned, well, in the order they are assigned. So I could, for example, go into post effects and add some bloom, and then for my bloom I can kind of bring the intensity up, and I can bring the softness down, bring the minimal limit, or maybe bring the softness up. It's going to add a sort of bloom effect to this visual. It's actually going to add a bloom effect to all visuals, in fact. So if I just go out and add some other visuals in, so if I, for example, added that video back in, or added in another effect, you can see that it's, in fact, that's not a very good example. You can kind of see that it's adding the bloom to that effect as well. So that adds, so these post effects are basically added to the final composite, which is what's here, and then that's what goes to the output. So there's a bloom effect, for example. Another effect is the bananagram effect. This allows you to create sort of Instagram-y looking filters, so I can have fade and vignette. I can change, I can add noise as well. I can choose a high red, green, blue value to kind of give a bit of tint to my highlights, etc. And as you can see, this is kind of showing down here which effect is doing what, so I can see the chain. So if I add a HSV adjust and I desaturate it, you can see that this is the chain of effects and how they're being applied to the final visual. So that's pretty much it for the effects system. There is also actually a way to, if you click on one and you want to get rid of it, you can hit deassign, and now we will have got rid of the bloom effect, but we've still kept the bananagram effect and the HSV adjust. So only other new things in the interface, there's now a Theta filtering slider, which means that if I have it at 0 and I move this, it's quite sudden, it's instant. It's going to instantly move to wherever I drag the mouse. But if I have my Theta filtering on, it's going to slowly interpolate between wherever I move and wherever I was. So rather than having like this sort of jagged kind of crosshair movement, you get a nice sort of smooth transition between faders. And that's on this fader as well, the central cross fader. The blend mode menu is now a lot quicker. This is no longer using Gal's menu system, but is instead just using an image that it pulls up, a texture, and then it just assigns a rectangle over that, so it's much faster than it was. There's also a BPM tapper at the top, thanks to Landon, who designed that. And that's basically 8 taps to set. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it'll set the BPM. The BPM, if I go 1, 2, and then leave it for a while, and I go back, it's 8 again. It has a timeout in it, so eventually it will just reset the number of beats. And it means that you don't get things like 5, 10, 20, 120. It will actually just set the BPM to whatever you set on that point. So that's pretty much it for the new things in the interface. The way to create a effect a post effect is to go into assets and post effects, and they all live in there. And if you go inside one in the network, if I just go to base add post, they live, or their banks rather, live here. So these are the banks that they're loaded into. And the actual post effects themselves come in from base post tox. So this is where they actually come in, and then when you select them and drag them, they go into the add post. There's a bit of optimization here in that this doesn't actually really need to bring in the whole tox, but that's for another day. So yeah, if I go into bank 1, which is empty, so that's not a very good one. If I go into bank, maybe this one. Okay, so here we go. So this is a sort of anatomy of a post effect. A post effect has an in one, it must have an out one, it must have a thumb. So it's very similar to the normal tox, except it has an in one here, and it also has a name dat, which is a text dat. So this text dat just has the name of the effect, because some effects, it's not quite obvious what they do really from a thumbnail, so I've put a naming convention in there for seeing that. So that's the basic anatomy of the post effect, and if you go into toxes, there is also now actually a template which is for the normal tox, and then the post effects template is there as well. So if I drag that on, there's just a template. It's actually just an in-out. It doesn't do anything, but it's quite a good starting point. If you want to create a template, you can go in now and go into post effects 1. I can start editing this, save this out to somewhere, and then it's ready to re-import back into the project. So I think that's pretty much all of the new features. One thing to mention is maybe a couple of bugs. When set to always on top, these channels can't be dragged. Hopefully that's going to be fixed soon. They're in the mapping, sometimes you, just like I did there, you can't drag the point the first time, so you just have to drag it twice, or double click it and then drag. The stoner and the mapping section are probably going to disappear in the next build, as mapping tools start to become post effects. So actually, post effects will also not just hold image filters, but could also hold mapping tools, etc., or even hold feed mappers or something like that. So there's a plan for a sort of Resolume style click to draw a quad and then warp the quad system, and maybe the stoner itself, a simplified version, will also go into the post effects setup, and then the mapping tab will simply disappear. It's not needed anymore really, if those go in. And other things that are going to go in soon are some new, there's going to be some hotkeys for switching between the different setups here. Right clicking on these banks will soon automatically switch to whichever one of these that they're loaded into. So if I right click on the bottom left bank, that's going to open up the bottom left parameter window down here. And there are also some MIDI mapping and OSC mapping learning sort of systems I'm thinking about maybe implementing as well. So that's pretty much it for now. So thanks a lot.